good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Awesome Wholesaler Experience podcast, where we look into the many facets of the job, the career, and the lifestyle of investment and insurance product wholesaling. I'm your host, the creator of the Awesome Wholesaler Experience, and yours truly, Awesome Mike. Hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning in today. Guess what? Yes, it's true. We have yet another special guest on the show today. And none other than Mr. Jim Anthony, otherwise known in the industry as Jim Komoszewski. And Jim has 22 years, a long time for being such a young and handsome young man there. Is that a typo, Jim? 22 years?
Yeah, it's not a typo.
Yeah, he has 22 years experience in the financial services industry, including several pivotal roles in both recruiting and practice management, developing effective strategies and programs to help support and grow financial advisors' businesses. Now, as president and chief executive officer of Investment Centers of America, Inc., otherwise known as ICA, Jim was responsible for overseeing the day-to-day operations and strategic management. Prior to this, Jim headed up recruiting and practice management for National Planning Holdings, NPH. He was SVP, Senior Vice President. All these acronyms are very near and dear to my heart from my military background, by the way. But he was the SVP of Practice Management and a regional manager at ICA, focusing on the key areas of relationship management, retention, and recruiting. But wait, there's more. Prior to that, he was the head of practice. Let me just read this better. He served as first vice president and director of practice management at NPC, which is National Planning Corp. He also spent 5 years, though, as one of us, a regional vice president for Jackson National Life, where he was the top or a top wholesaler and a two-time, like Vanilla Ice, two for you, the two-time receipt of the Leadership Award. Not to make light of that, Jim, congratulations. Now, Jim earned a bachelor's degree from the University of Northwestern in St. Paul, Minnesota. Like, that's hard. Anyways, he holds his insurance licenses in several states, as well as a FINRA Series 7, 24, 63, and 66 registrations. And I will tell you that those are difficult to get. So welcome to the show, Mr. Jim Anthony, Jim Komoszewski. How are you today, man?
I'm great, Austin, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you being patient as I blunder through your bio, trying to add some humor to it. In all seriousness, though, you are a colorful fellow. Everyone appreciates your levity. That also is, a running mate or the other piston to your professionalism. So thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. During the pre-show, you mentioned that I mentioned your guitar in the background, and I had to bring it up. I think it's very intriguing that you are actually call it an established musician and recording artist. Now, we won't go too far into this, but tell us a little bit about Jim Anthony.
Yeah, so Jim Anthony, that's my stage name. Anthony was my middle name. But yeah, I, over the course of 12 or 15 years, off and on, recorded 7 or 8 different albums, mostly in the country music realm, but spent a lot of my time as a songwriter. And long story very short on that is, as a songwriter, you write with or for other people. And then some songs you just like yourself. So you put them on an album and get out and play every once in a while. So that was a lot of fun. That was a really good time in my life. And by the way, I learned a lot about some of the things we're going to talk about in terms of, a business, a process of staying relevant, the principles. You're self-employed when you're a musician. Even if you have a record deal, you have to do all of those things and do them really well until you make it to the big time. And so I actually learned a lot about what some of the stuff we're going to talk about by being a singer-songwriter.
Well, Jim Anthony, you mentioned that was country music, so I am fully prepared for my truck not to start when I go out there. My dog's coughing in the background. He might die now. What is the deal with country music being such a bummer sometimes? So sad. I mean, not all of it, but my goodness, there's some.
You know what? It can be, and I prided myself actually on writing and recording and performing songs very unlike that. I like to put a positive spin on everything. Bismarck, that was the city that I was last in, maybe a Freudian, but business. But music, whatever approach it is, I think it's really important. So it's funny you say that because I kind of created a niche, and everyone's like, "Oh, I'm writing with Jim again. We're gonna all have to smile at the end of this song." And I hope so.
Jim Anthony, the author and writer in Happy Country. That's cool. You know, one thing you also did write about a month ago, and you wrote essentially that, you know, you always get the most from employees by genuinely desiring the very best for those employees.
Yeah.
And you went on to say, and quote, great leaders are selfless that adhere to the credo of mission first and people always.
Yeah.
Now, I spent a dozen years in the military, and during my infantry officer training, that was drilled into our head. Mission first, people always. What does that mean to you?
Well, a couple of things. And by the way, thank you for your service. You know, mission first, people always. As business leaders, oftentimes we can intentionally or unintentionally just say, all right, here's my major corporate initiative or major corporate initiatives, whether it's a department, you're an individual wholesaler, you're a financial advisor, or the president, CEO of a broker dealer. You have goals, you have objectives, you have missions. But what we have to realize is that people are actually what get our missions complete. When I was the president and CEO of a broker dealer, if the goal was to increase recruiting by, $25 million in 1 year, how's that going to get done? Not by me, right? It's by the efforts of other individuals. So what that means to me really is, yes, I need to keep the mission first, but people are always important because people actually fulfill the missions and get the results. And I think it's important. I've had the benefit and really the luxury of working under some amazing leadership in my career, in particular at Jackson National. They're just a powerhouse for great leadership. There were people that, during market down cycles or product changes or pricing changes, I would have run through a brick wall if it was on fire repeatedly for them because I believed in them, that much. And to the point where I said, listen, I don't know. I can't see where you're asking me to go. I don't know what's in it for me. Maybe nothing. It seems like there's probably a setback for me along the way, but that's okay. I trust you. I'm following you. I wanted to be that type of leader. And I wanted to make sure that people knew that we're putting the mission, but the people are important to this. And I really do believe you get the most from individuals by genuinely wanting the very best for them. And without that, we're just managers. There's a difference between managing and leading. Great leaders are good managers, but great managers aren't always very good leaders. We have a lack of leadership in our profession. We just really do. There are some excellent ones, but they're few and further between, and it's getting that way more and more of the time. We have to focus back on leadership.
Wow. I've been waiting to say that for a while, Jim. That was quite a mouthful. Congratulations and thank you. By the way, it was an honor to serve our country. In fact, that's why I have Old Glory behind us, and my colors also represent my heart and my passion. And thanks for saying that too. So I appreciate you doing that. Let's kind of take it back though. You're an interesting fellow, and as I was learning more about you over the last couple of months, and then even intensely the last couple of days, digging into your story here, came across that you graduated from the University of Northwestern, which is in St. Paul, one of my most favorite cities and one of the Twin Cities. I like Minneapolis, of course, as well. But you graduated with a BS. We know what BS stands for, but a BS in social sciences.
Yeah.
Age of 19, you're strapping a six string across your back and twanging it out. How in the world do you end up in the financial services business?
Yeah, when you look at my resume, it's not a logical path, right? Even to go from, wholesaling, I actually wholesaled all combined for about 9 years. People would always ask me, how do you go from wholesaling to the president, CEO of a broker dealer? I don't think anything about what I've done has been, very normal, but here's how I got into the industry. It was admittedly by accident. The best and biggest accident that's ever happened to me. My bride, who I met in college at the University of Northwestern, graduated with a degree in finance, I think 4.0 or really close to that. And I remember that because I always tortured her, like, hey, why do you study so hard, right? And here I was, a social science major. But I graduated, got a job, my first job out of college. Within 60 days, I was asked to leave that job, right? And so we didn't have cell phones back then. So I called my wife in her cubicle, and she worked at what is now RBC. It was Dane Bosworth. And I called her up and I said, hey, I lost my job. I'll see you tonight over dinner. I hope we can still afford to eat. And her supervisor, through the thin cubicle wall, heard that conversation and said, hey, is everything okay with Jim? She said, well, he lost his job. He said, have him call me. I called him and he said, why don't you come in? You don't have a degree in business. You don't have a degree in finance, but we can maybe find something for you. So listen to this, Austin Mike. I started as a temporary intern, 3 steps below the mailroom at what was then Dane Bosworth, now RBC. And I'm glad that I did. I'm really grateful that I did, because while everybody else was griping about their job in offices, in cubicles, and they had great titles and making way more money than I was going in and going, I love this place. You know what my first job was? My first job was when the trades came in through the wire machine, the cage would rip them off and give them to me, and I'd look up the rep code, go YA06, I got to go get this over to so-and-so so their assistant can execute a trade. By the way, I should still be doing that. I'd weigh 165 pounds if I was running around that building every day again. But that's how I started in this business. And I loved it so much that I think my passion and my enthusiasm just kind of was shining through. I had the unfair advantage of it was all new to me. So there was excitement and enthusiasm and passion. But I did well in that job, which created a job and opportunity, in operations, which then later created an opportunity, in product. In product management, I wasn't a product manager, but I worked into the product management department. Then I learned that product, which was a variable annuity. And then I learned how to market it, internal marketing. Then I learned how to, answer the phones for the advisors calling in saying, I think I might want to do an annuity, but what do they do again? And then that led to wholesaling opportunities. But that's how I got in the business. It was very much by quote unquote mistake. It was very much by accident. Like I said, best mistake and accident that I could ever have, because here I am now, actually 24 years later. I should update my bio. 24 years later, and just looking back and saying, what in the world? How did this happen? And you're saying the same thing, which is why you're asking. But again, I'm grateful for that path and that journey.
What a ride. And the good news is that you've got another 24 years for your next chapter, and probably after that as well. You mentioned that you had some, let's just call it inspiration at Jackson. Yeah. And I'm a huge fan of that company. And in fact, Greg Seacott, was my neighbor. I went to school with him and his family. Great people there. But tell us, what was the shining star, or what was the secret sauce, or what was in the water at Jackson that led to that kind of inspiration you mentioned?
Great question. It was guys like Greg Seacott. I can't speak highly enough about him. There's a gentleman that hired me back in 2004. His name is Scott Romine. He's now the president of Jackson Advisory. I forget the exact name of the area, but when you have leaders like that who understand. Now, when I went there in 2004, I think as a distribution company, I think overall we were maybe like number 16 or 18 in the space, and we were doing okay. I was I think the first guy in the regional broker-dealer space and wirehouse channel to do a $10 million a month. It was a really big deal. Everybody called me all the way up, hey, congratulations. Now, if you do $10 million a month, it's like, hey, you suck and I should resign for hiring you, but that's where they were. And when you look at how quickly they just rose through the distribution channels, and you look at what happened, the secret sauce, number one, is they had some effective leadership. They knew what they wanted. They had the grit and determination to go through it and say, these are our goals. This is how we're going to do it. But the other thing they did was they said, we need to figure out. So let me explain it this way. At that time, the way that we were wholesaling was the same way that people were wholesaling 10 years prior, but compliance had changed, products had changed, needs had changed, the way that we communicate had changed. I remember the first time I got a BlackBerry as a wholesaler, and I think 99, I'm like, man, this is cool. At first you go, this is cool because now my clients can get a hold of me wherever. And then you're sitting on a beach in Maui with your wife trying to rest. You're going, man, these people can get a hold of me everywhere. But it was great for business. But what they did was they stayed relevant. They were always looking ahead of, where's the industry going and how should we get there? And then the last thing is they always made sure that they were working with advisors in a way that was meaningful to the advisor, not just convenient for the distribution channel. And I think that that's a really big and important thing. I did the same thing in the broker-dealer world. I do it now as a consultant. I think that those are really important things. Generally speaking, though, it was great leadership. It was true vision. I mean, I asked a company, I won't say who, but I was consulting with a company, and I asked them yesterday on the phone, I said, what are your 3 or 4 major corporate initiatives? Now, this is a big company. And there was just silence. I thought, you got to be kidding me. I said, can you give me one? Just tell me the most important one. What is the most important thing to you as an organization? They said, I suppose it's fill in the blank. And I found that to be very disturbing, because where we lack vision, right? And so, Jackson, has, and I think will continue to be very successful because of the leadership and the vision that they have. The vision, as you know, is saying, this is what we're good at. This is the space we want to be in. The product management is really good, but the leadership says, hey, everybody come with me. And let's not just do this, let's dominate. Because who wants to dabble, right? If you and I were wholesalers, I never wanted to just be mediocre. Nobody ever shoved me a goal, and never once did I have the response of, all right, I'll see if I can hit this. It was, well, that's cute. What am I going to do after May? And that's the driving factor at Jackson is they attract the right talent, they develop the right individuals to say, here's your goal, but what can we do to help you smash it? My national sales manager would call me frequently and say, you're doing a great job. Remember, my role here is to help you remove obstacles and hurdles to stay focused on your goal. What can I help you with? Talk about servant leadership. I mean, like I said, I was so beyond, blessed to have that type of leadership. And it's still there today, I know, within their organization.
Yeah, and many organizations are like that. Unfortunately, there are many that are not.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of, let's just call them, no disrespect to the engineers, but they try to engineer a machine, a system that will work, and they leave out that people element. They leave out the intangibles, the passion that comes through a wholesaler's voice when they really believe in the company and the product that they're representing. And they try to create a business plan, let's say. Now, you've done a lot of work in writing about business plans. Let's dig into that a little bit, if you don't mind. Just kind of give us the overarching shell nut in a nutshell, yeah. Your opinion on a business plan, and maybe we can have a little dialogue about that. But what are your feelings about the elusive business planning for wholesalers?
Well, first of all, everyone should have one. But before people tune out, let me explain that it doesn't have to be, nor should it be, a complex business plan. And I'll get back to this in a minute, but it can be on a 3x5 index card. I've got some here somewhere, and I'll tell you what, index cards made me amen, brother, made me a very successful wholesaler. And I'll share a tip if we can remember on that too. I don't want to digress too much from this point. But you're right. What we can't do is we can't approach a business plan that's formulaic, right? And what distribution companies and broker-dealers and firms need to really rethink is one business plan does not fit all, right? So we have to play to the individual strengths, communication style, demographics, etc., of the individual in a wholesaler or financial advisor. I'll speak to those two because they're very similar. But the important factor is to say, okay, these are, and you've got to play, of course, to the products and everything, but you take a wholesaler out of Manhattan, right, who is doing a bang-up job, and you put them in Des Moines, Iowa, and give them Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, and they do things the way they did in Manhattan. You come in there probably with cufflinks and a $7,000 custom shirt and the right handshake, and you do what you do, and you pick them up in a Tesla. In certain parts of the country, that's just not going to fly really, really, really well. And so I say that because, look, I've been in both parts of the country, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for the approaches everywhere. What I have more respect for is playing to the individual strengths, circumstances, and resources that you have where you are. So when I say business plan, I don't want anybody to glaze over and go, oh gosh, business plan. I have to do those once a year for my divisional or my national sales manager. Yes, they should be done. No, they shouldn't be formulaic. It should not be a template. fill in the blank. I really believe that adamantly in terms of preparing a business plan. Now, that being said, I've got kind of a 6 steps to excellence process that I take on this. And it always starts, listen, whether the ink is still wet on you signing an offer to become an external wholesaler or financial advisor, or you've been doing it for 25 years and you're rolling in the money, everybody in those 2 categories, everywhere in between, can benefit from this. We have to stop where we are. The first thing we have to do is we have to evaluate.
Hey, Jim, let me interrupt you really quickly before we get down to your 6 steps. I want to talk about the 10 tenets as well. But I want to dig one layer deeper on business planning before we get into this. And I want to read a quote that you wrote. And I quote you. You say, "It's often said that knowledge is power, but in the context of creating a business plan, that theory doesn't always hold water. Knowledge without action is useless, and a business plan brimming with brilliant ideas that are never implemented is equally worthless." Well done, by the way. You're writing like a real songwriter there. But the points are very important to make. Can you tell us a little bit about how do we take this knowledge, this plan, and craft it into something that Johnny Wholesaler is actually going to do?
Well, I think the first thing is to make sure that it's simple and it speaks to the big rocks, right? The big rocks are, I want this many advisors, in this geographic space that are driving most of my income. The Pareto principle. I want to spend 80% of my time, energy, and budget. That's a really big thing with these individuals. And then everything after that, is gonna filter through. I think simplicity is key, and making sure that there's a power. There's a tremendous amount of power in focusing on the right things, but identifying them. A lot of us, me included, spent several years being successful by winging it, right? And just because sometimes you have a lot of drive, you can be articulate, you can communicate, you can play the game, you have strong relationship skills, you can do well. You can do better with a plan. Some people think that business plans are, I don't want to feel like I'm in a prison cell. I don't want guardrails. I want to be me. I want to be free. I want to be loose. Absolutely. And you should do that. But who are you going to be free and loose with? Right? Where are you going to spend that? Where are you going to focus that drive and that energy? And those things are important. A successful business plan comes down to, what are my top 3 or 4, max 5 initiatives? And then, how am I going to get there? When we focus on too much, it spreads our time and our energy and our budget around. So again, back to the Pareto principle, I did a thing on most business plans with wholesalers. I walk them through a process to a 2-layered kind of segmentation, if you will. And the first layer is your target. For me, and for not everybody, but for a lot of advisors, it's I call it the target 20. Okay. And the target 20 is where 20 individuals or teams where I'm going to get 80% of my revenue from in a mutually beneficial relationship, right? So if I put enough and I work with them in a partnership way and say, if I do these events, help you with this, support you with these types of things, this is how much, revenue, what can we drive? Again, mutually beneficial. But that first layer is the target 20. 80% of my time, energy, and budget should go to those 20 individual offices or teams or practitioners. And then the next layer is the focus 50. I got 20% of my time, energy, and budget that's going to go to that next tier. The third tier is everybody else. I bring that up as an example because your business plan might just be tier 1, 20% of my time, energy, and budget is going to go to these 20. Because let's just say your goal is 100 million, because I'm Polish. I like to use simple math, right? Let's just say it's 100 million. Your target 20, it's very simple, right? If I want to get to 100 million from 20 people, I know what I need to get out of those teams. So I know who to look for, promotion by attraction. If I know who I'm looking for, I know how I have to probably market to them and what I need to do for them. And then part of my business plan is to go sit with them and say, listen, I'm going to work super close with only 20 people. As a successful financial advisor, you'd like to have 100 clients with $300 million, I'm sure. Right? I'm doing the same thing as a wholesaler. I want to be able to focus my time, energy, expertise, etc., to you in this capacity. But we need to get to an agreement, what realistic expectation of what the revenue is that you can get from them. After you've identified they can be one of those 20, it's on. You dedicate your time, energy, and resources to go to them. Now, I'm not saying just call. Some people might already be thinking, really call on 70 people? For some of us, I'd say, you know what? Why are you calling on 70 people? You should be calling on 30 or 40, right? Some people need to call on 150 if you're in the first year and you're developing. You got to find those relationships. But back to your original question, when it comes to a good business plan, it should at least start there. And with the index cards, that business plan can be on there. Here are my people. This is my geography that I'm willing to serve, that I can be flexible with. Here are some other things that I can do to get there. But start there. And again, I bring up the 3x5 index card because, the quote you read, I've worked with advisors who have, I'll give you a quick example. Someone spent $16,000 for their practice on a business plan. And they said, I said, you have a business plan? They said, yes, we do. And it's a really good one. I said, give me the 30-second cliff notes on it. He couldn't. And so through the conversation, I said, listen, I love you like a brother, so I'm going to tell you this. You spend $16,000 on a document that at best is going to secure a wobbly table in your boardroom. You don't even know what's in it. You're not following it. Knowledge is power, except when you don't do anything about it. So then it's meaningless. It's pointless. So the business plan should be as large or small as the one that you're willing to follow. A lot of us in the wholesaler world, we got to focus our energy. We have to really focus on it and make sure that we can make an impact. Because the other thing, a lot of people, except for guys like us that carry the bag, don't realize it's a tough job. It's draining. It's exhausting. We're on demand. We have to travel. We're away from our wives and kids and all of those other things. So through a good process of a business plan, you can eliminate a lot of the noise and a lot of the clutter and say, you know what, this doesn't go through the filter of what I'm trying to achieve, which are these things, put it on there. Keep it simple, keep it basic, and keep it focused.
Well said, well said. Tell us about this time, once upon a time when Mr. Jim Komoszewski took over this territory, dead last in the company. Sounds like a movie, by the way.
Yeah.
And with the magic wave of a wand or two, you actually came in first loser or in second place, only to Southern California, which, as we know, is a very rich part of the country. So kudos on that. Following the following year, you jockeyed back and forth. But what's more important is how you did it.
Yeah.
Can you give us some secret pearls of wisdom, some secret sauce, something, a nugget to reward the people that are listening to this? How'd you do it?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing is I went through that process of narrowing the focus, right? I got this list of like 5,000 advisors in like 7 states or 6 states. And I realized that I couldn't be everything to everybody. I tried for a little while and it wasn't working. And that's when I kind of came up with this Target 20 Focus 52 tier system. Also realizing I had limit, think about this, time, energy, and monetary budget for wholesalers. We have all 3 of them. All 3 of them are limited. I only have so much time. I only have so much energy. I only have so much budget. So I want to focus that where I can make more of an impact. So I went through the region at first and identified who can I do this business with? Who can I partner with? I wasn't telling them up front, but at first it was like, could these people hit my target 20? No, they're my focus 50 or they're somebody else. And so that's the very first thing I did. I narrowed my focus. I quickly identified who I could work with, who I could partner with, and how I could help serve them better. Because the indirect result was if I could serve them better by not being Mr. Scatterbrain and going everywhere all of the time, there was going to be a good return on that investment. That's the most important thing I did.
How did you select them? How did you do that? I mean, you were brand new, 7 states, obviously you didn't know everybody. How does a person even, how did you select?
Yeah. So, the process was this. I first, of course, went to kind of the major, markets, the major arteries, if you will, and started there. Not because, smaller markets can't give you business. Some of my biggest producers were in smaller communities that I had to drive 3 hours round trip, and go watch them eat a chicken fried steak, at a diner or something. And I loved that. But, in terms of knowing who they are, I just went and I started meeting with them. Now, I was in the regional broker-dealer space and wirehouses. So I would go into the branch manager and let them explain to them, I can help your branch. Here are the ways how. You tell me who I should spend my time and energy, and I will show you how it's going to be a win for you, for your branch, for your division, and all the way up through the company. I want you to smash your goals, and I think I can be a key part of that. but you just got to tell me who I should be working with. And then would you make some introductions? I'd meet a top producer. I'd start to earn and develop their trust and really build a relationship. I saw something about a handwritten note on your LinkedIn site. My goodness. Listen, that was so simple for me to write handwritten notes. By the way, here's a gem. After every single one-on-one meeting that I had with someone that would be a target 20 or a focus 50, every night I'd go to a hotel room and I'd write a handwritten note on that first meeting. Thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me. I respect your time. I know it's precious. I know it's valuable. I respect that. And I look forward to future conversations because we can and will build a mutually beneficial relationship. And I look forward to that next conversation. And I'd mail them off. You know how many times you call someone with the best idea in the world? Crickets, nothing back. You handwrite a note and you send it to them in a world where nobody else is handwriting notes, or very few people. You stand out. You stand out because it's a relationship thing. And by the way, I didn't want to make these opportunities or these relationships about pricing or about product or about returns. I wanted to make it about you and me. Because here's the thing. There's the second, if I establish a relationship on product or pricing or even the company, right? Then if the company changes or if I move, they're not going with me. I sold them on that. Here's what I sold them on to the branch managers, to answer your question, and the individual advisors. I'm your annuity expert. I'm your go-to person. Here's another quick pearl on this. I used to get the prospectuses of every major competitor when they came out. The first thing I would do is I'd go to a branch when I knew something was being launched, and I'd get a hard copy and I'd go back to my hotel room or my office at home, and I would read through that entire thing. And I would circle and I would highlight and I would know it. You know what? 9 times out of 10, I knew the product of the competitor better than the guy carrying the bag for it. So when someone would call me and say, I've got an opportunity for this or that or the other thing, now hear me out on this. I would say, hey, thanks for considering me. You're one of my partners, and I value this relationship so much so that I have to tell you, our product is pretty good for this 83-year-old that wants this feature and that feature at this pricing. But you know, XYZ companies is actually a little bit better. And they go, you got to be kidding me. Now, where could that possibly go wrong, right? They're going to call me the next time. I've built trust. I've become the expert. I wanted to be, in my case, I was a variable annuity wholesaler. I wanted to be the trusted resource. Check this out. I wanted to be the first call. I didn't want them calling anybody else. And if they knew I was looking out for the best interest of their practice and their client, I knew for a fact that I was going to get that. The advisors respected that. The branch managers respected that. The complex managers, you know, and all the way up. And that just translated to more business. By me giving another opportunity away, only almost every single time turned into future opportunities, and the exponential return was unbelievable. My referability when I did that would go through the roof. I'd give a ticket away. Sometimes it's painful. You're like, I really would like this $1 million ticket. I would really like this $1 million ticket. What should I do? Internal dilemma. I give it away. Within the course of 30 days, I get 3, 4, 5 referrals through that person. You're not going to believe what this guy did. You're not going to believe what he said. And then he explained the product. I actually have an example where I sat down with an advisor and a client, and another wholesaler pitched the product, and they were going to compare, you know, the two and make a decision. I didn't do it in front of the other wholesaler out of respect. He was actually misrepresenting his product to the negative. It actually worked better than what he explained it. So at the end of the meeting, I asked the advisor, I said, can I speak with you outside just for a minute? And we went outside and I said, listen, I know this is going to sound crazy, but that's not how his product works. It works this way, which is more advantageous to your client. I'm not here to represent them, and I can't and I shouldn't, but you can, and here's the deal. So I always made sure to know the competition really, really well, and that always boded well.
You know, I got some devil's advocates for you there, and from personal experience. What do you do, you know, when that product changes, that product doesn't perform like the manufacturer said it was going to perform, and you're the guy that told me to use the product. You're the guy that said split the ticket. Now you have to bear the responsibility of a company that, you know, really you didn't represent officially. I understand you're trying to look out for the advisor, but is that a calculated risk, or is that something that, you know, you kind of played the cards and you got a winning hand dealt to you because the times that you did that, it worked out?
Well, it worked out, but there's two principles to this. The first one is to make sure that I always had a very clear understanding. The second thing is usually wouldn't call the external wholesaler, but I would go into the office and say, listen, get the internal or get somebody from the company on the phone. I took the role of an advisor. I was an advisor to the advisor. These are the questions that you should ask. These are the questions that you must ask. You need clarification on these things. But I also always made it very clear. I'm like Fox News. I report and you decide. You bear the responsibility. But this is what I would look at if I was in your shoes. These are the questions that I would ask. And this is the type of product situation that I would like to be in. Now, don't get me wrong. I would love for you to choose me as your guy for this ticket. Awesome, Mike. But I understand that you might want to split the ticket or even just have it completely go over there. And that's okay too. So I think in terms of, setting the expectation and making sure, again, it comes back to me wanting to be the advisor, to the advisor.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it really leads to the value that you have for yourself and your confidence in being able to kind of, stand on your own merits, whether your product is a winner or not. I use a theory called the 777 principle. Basically the recipient, whether it's a client for a financial advisor or even specifically a wholesaler, if that advisor or that client doesn't think that you're a 7 personally, 1 to 10, they don't have to love you. You need to be a 9 or a 10, but at least a 7. Your company has to be a 7, and then the product actually or the solution has to be a 7 as well. You line all 3 of those tumblers up, and it's kind of the beginning of the jackpot. So, you've written quite a few things about value and about success. And this is applicable not only to wholesalers and financial advisors, but to any executive and probably any person, frankly. One of my favorite ones that you kind of forwarded here, it's a quote by Oleg. I won't ruin his last name. Actually, Vishnupolsky, not that hard to do. He said, your value does not decrease based on someone's inability to see your worth. Your value does not decrease based on someone's inability to see your worth. To me, it sounds nice, but isn't someone's value actually based on what the other person finds to be valuable?
So value is perception, right? And we know people that their perceived value is much higher than what they can bring to the table. Right. And then there's kind of the other, the burden, if you will, of responsibility is on us to show our value. I saw a man wearing a t-shirt. I was downtown Minneapolis the other day and he was walking in and it said, I love this. I got to find this t-shirt. It says, I can explain this to you, or I can explain it to you, but I can't make you understand. Right? Value isn't what we can explain. It's not even what we show. It's what someone else perceives or what they understand. And that's what we have to be focused on. If they don't understand my value, I put the burden back on myself. That's on me. I need to be able to make them understand, not just tell them. That's the mistake a lot of wholesalers make and advisors. We try to tell, I say, what's your value proposition? They go, I send a quarterly newsletter. I do. That's not it. Right? It's not in what we explain. It's not in what we say. It's what we do. I have an 18-year-old and 20-year-old. And let's just say that, and he doesn't, but let's just say, my son, when he was younger, he kept busting curfew. And every night I'm like, you're an hour late. This is the 14th time in a row. And he goes, yeah, Dad, I'm sorry. My question for you, Awesome Mike, is he really sorry? No, it's just based on what he said. And so it's not what we say that matters. It's what we do. And that's really important. And that's how we start to get individuals to understand the value. I would even say in a meeting as a wholesaler, listen, these are the things that I'm going to do, but don't just take my word for it. We're going to go through these together. And through the course of time, you're going to realize that I am accessible, that I am responsive, that I am valuable, that I am an expert, and that I'm going to truly partner with you. But don't take my word for it. Let's enter into this partnership. Kick the old tire, right? And that's how I would go into that. But you bring up a good point. It is perception, but it's not what we explain. It's what we help them to understand. And the burden is absolutely on us.
Yeah, those are words of wisdom there. Thank you for those. And I believe in the theory that what gets measured gets accomplished. So by you offering to kind of put the proof in the pudding for that advisor or that customer of yours is very important. Now you've developed some systems, and I think this is even opening the chapter on your next the next chapter of your life. And well, a couple of them that I really like are these 6 steps to excellence, or I might even say to awesomeness. The 6 steps to excellence: evaluate, segment, develop, execute, monitor, and adjust. Tell us a little bit more about those. Maybe your favorite one, or is there one that's more important than the other?
I give them equal weighting, and here's why. One is, the system, kind of a process we need to use on an ongoing basis. Listen, success, we know this, excellent is a constant pursuit. It should be like bathing. If I bathe on Monday and just go, hey, I'm clean, I'm good for the rest of the week, my wife is going to have, some words about that. And so if I want to continue to be successful, I have to make sure that I'm kind of following the process. And again, it's going to sound like I'm very formulaic. I'm not. I am upfront, because there's 2 things we have to do. We have to develop a process and a formula, but then we just have to focus on implementing and executing. The problem with a lot of wholesalers and advisors is every day they're going back and forth between strategizing, building a formula, and then implementing, executing, going back and forth. It's horribly inefficient. It's very frustrating, and it lacks fulfillment. Where I can have advisors or wholesalers have a high fulfillment factor, there's a direct correlation to the results and the success. So the 6 steps to excellence is a process, and it's a continuum. And you said them. It's evaluate, segment, develop, execute, monitor, and adjust. And they're pretty self-explanatory. And that is, again, whether you're brand new or you're 20 years super successful, you can benefit by doing this. Evaluate what's your current run rate. Do you have a target 20? Do you have a focus 50 or something like that on your own? Do you know where to spend and target your time, energy, and budget, and where it's going to be? Or are you running out doing meetings and just hoping that stuff comes back in? Because a lot of us did that. A lot of us can make a good living, but doing that. But then after you evaluate, then you segment, and you just go, yep, here's my version of a target 20, focus 50, and then everybody else. And then develop a strategy. So I know what my report is. I know the business I'm getting. I know who I want to target through segmentation. Now, what's my strategy to do there? And then once I build a strategy to say, here's my rotation, here are my zones, here's my budget, here are how many workshops, whatever I'm going to do, then I got to get out there and I got to execute. The execute is where the 10 tenets of excellence come in. But lastly, when we execute, we have to have a system to monitor, not just our daily. Man, if you're anything like me, I knew that our numbers came out at about 5:15 Central Time every morning. So I would wake up, my body like 5:07, and I'm like, okay, what are my numbers? What are my numbers? What are my numbers? And I was just motivated to see what they were or weren't. But it has to go beyond that. I have to monitor, are the relationships going well? Do I have the right people in my target 20 or my focus 50? Should somebody in the focus 50 go to the target 20? Did one of my target 20 go to heaven? Did they leave the channel I'm in and I have to replace that? Which is another reason to have focus 50, right? That's your secondary team. So you got to monitor what's important on a regular basis. Then you just have to make the adjustments. If you set up a plan that's formulaic and you just stick with it, sometimes people do things that aren't working and I go, why are you still doing it that way then? If it's not working, well, it's part of my plan. Maybe you should adjust part of your plan then. And then it just kind of goes back in. That one's really important. But going back to the execution, the 10 tenets of excellence, I call them the B-attitudes, Beatitudes, right? And those are very simple. And I'll tell you why I think that they're important, and then I'll pause there if you want to direct this conversation. There are things that we can do that are free. They don't cost us anything, that can separate us. You don't have to be, to your point, I love that 777, by the way. I'm going to use it, and I promise to give you credit. But we don't have to be a 9. We don't have to be a 10. The standard for being a good wholesaler advisor isn't perfection, but I do think it's excellence. And the things that are excellent isn't just in presentation skill. It's not just in how I dress. It's not just in my handshake. It's not just in seeing someone face to face 4 times a year. It's when I have interactions and what's their experience like. Am I giving them a relationship and a culture in that relationship of excellence, or am I just checking boxes, right? And so, for example, the first one is be valuable. I talked about being that trusted resource, making sure that they knew that I didn't want them to know me as the Jackson guy. I love Jackson, obviously, but I didn't want to be the Jackson guy. I didn't want to be the fill in the blank feature guy. I didn't want to be the least expensive guy. I didn't want to be the a la carte investment. I don't have to go into a model portfolio and I can still get these awesome benefits guy. I wanted to be a valuable guy. I wanted to be the guy where they go, you need to call Jim Como because that dude knows more about variable annuities than anybody else on the planet, and he will shoot straight with you. That's a B attitude. I want to be valuable. We can go on from there, but I want to pause there because I think that those 10 tenets of excellence are really important because it's a way for me to distinguish myself from my competition that's out there. Because guess what? And we all know this, in the wholesaling world, there's always a handful or more people trying to get your relationship broken away from you. We think the differentiator is a round of golf. By the way, never once in my entire career played a round of golf. Never once as a wholesaler. There's a lot of things that I didn't do, but I made sure I focused my energy on these things that are free, which are 10 tenets of excellence. And those became very, very important to me. I'll pause there.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And you're just a fountain of wealth and knowledge. So I'm sure that the audience, wholesalers, financial advisors, and others are going to appreciate it. Just to kind of recap, you have the 6 steps of excellence. These are what to do. Then you have the 10 tenets of excellence. And this is really how to be.
Yeah.
As you're doing those things. You know, a lot of my reading and research and even personal experiences led me to hear that every advisor, every person really wants this value add. Like they understand they can learn about the product, especially now with this thing called the internet.
Mm-hmm.
They can learn about the product. They don't need to know about these different products and such. They want the value add. But then I ask you, Jim, how come every executive search firm, every job posting that wants a wholesaler, they talk about geography? Do you have experience in these kind of products? And do you have experience in these kind of channels? They don't say anything about what are your soft skills? What is your value add? Is that why there's such high turnover? Is there a disconnect there, or am I missing something?
I think that there is a disconnect. Now, let me back up though. I understand starting there, right? We want someone, if we can, that's in a territory that's familiar, that the advisors have experience with, and that they know the products. But listen, those are all things we can teach anybody, even a guy like me. I could even learn what variable annuities did, right? And so I understand starting there, but the things that make the most successful wholesalers and advisors, in my very humble opinion, but a very strong opinion, it's not those things. It's the things that we can't teach them. There are things we can cultivate, nurture, and develop. But being, for example, a lot of wholesalers are known for not being punctual. I don't know why, because it's free to be on time. It doesn't cost you anything. It shows respect. Well, we have to be able to do that. But I can tell someone, if I'm a divisional or national sales manager, you should be on time. You'd think that would be just a known, thing, but it's not, right? And so the focus has to start the foundation on, do they know the product? Can they represent it? Do they have existing relationships? That's all fine. I understand casting the net wide, but if it was me in a hiring position as a divisional or national sales manager, once I get through that first filter, I want to talk to them about these things. I want to talk to them about, give me an example of someone that you identified that you wanted a mutually beneficial relationship for, that would bring you the revenue that fit your model of the people you want to work with. But it took you a while. And how long did it take to start getting revenue from them, or tickets, whatever you want to call it? And what was how persistent were you, and what did you do through that process? What did you do with that adversity? I want to know things like that. But to answer your question, unfortunately, the industry has to start there, but they stop there a lot of times. They stop there and they're selling themselves short. And then here's the other thing. We're setting them up for failure. One of the things we talked, I don't want to keep talking about Jackson, but one of the things they did exceptionally well was they went through things like this. When you first started with them, they made sure that they talked to you about these types of things. They didn't assume you're doing these. They wanted to make sure that we separated ourselves when I was there in terms of success. So I think it's important to go back to that and to revisit this. I think every distribution company in the country could do a better job at this. Some are excellent at it. Some are below average, but everybody should focus on it just a little bit more. And here's why. when you can get more out of your existing field force, it's less disruptive for you, for your future pipeline, for the business and the inflows and the net flows of your company. Identify the right people, find them, but make sure that you can continue to nurture and develop them and keep them on there long term and set them up for success. Invest back in them. It's really important to do instead of, well, he checked these 4 boxes, let's put him in there and see what happens. We got to stop doing that as an industry. We really do.
So what do you think then? I mean, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. You can tell him, hey, punctuality is important. In fact, part of the reason why you are being offered this position is because you're here on time. It's important to you. You obviously, your interest dictates the level of punctuality. I even think that sometimes wholesalers find success and they self-sabotage because they really don't have the call it the metal that they feel like they deserve that success. But what do you think it is? Is it the stick or is it the carrot?
I think the answer is yes, right? I think the answer is yes. Yes, exactly. Let's clobber him with the carrot stick. Well, look, I mean, it's a performance industry. We've got to be able to perform, to do well and to maintain our job. But let me take it back and ask you a question. Have you ever worked for a wholesaling company, distribution company, who has said to you, as an organization, these values are important to us for our clients? These tenets are what we want you to represent out in the field. Have you ever had an organization give you clear, outside of this is your goal and everything else, did you ever have that?
I did. And I will give them a shout from the top of the mountain. It was CNL. And it's where I started, where I got my foundation, got my break. The company has turned over dramatically over the years. In fact, we often joke that there's a big oak tree out behind the headquarters there, and everybody's name is carved in it that was there and is now gone. But their fundamental foundation, their core value number 1 was that we respect the dignity of each individual. And the reason why I know this so well, Jim, is because I got hit with the stick. Because my previous career, I was an infantry officer, and if the bullets didn't show up to the battlefield, people were going to die. So I would have an intense and elevated enthusiasm, let's call it, and that was also carried with me when my materials didn't show up for a seminar. And I didn't respect the dignity of the person that was supposed to send the materials to the seminar. And I was informed that, nobody's going to die if your materials didn't show up. Okay. So we respected the dignity of each individual. And I even went to let's just call him a leader at that point. And I had just received this watch actually as a trophy from my previous year's sales. And I said, hey, it's a good thing I can sell, right? And he stopped and he said, it doesn't matter if you can sell or not. If you can't respect the dignity of each individual, you cannot work here. So that is such a memorable story, Jim, because I think it's so rare. When I was at other firms, and I won't disparage them publicly here, but they know who they are. It wasn't about values. It was about more, and more. And it was about Alec Baldwin, ABC. You want a family? You want to go home and see your kids? F you, hit the bricks, pal, because you're not welcome here. So I've been in those situations as well. Not to rant, but those values are endearing, and I think they actually bridge performance gaps. Because if you're an asshole of a company and your product doesn't perform, everyone is cheering at your funeral. No one's going to save you. So that's my experience with that. Let me kind of shift gears here a little bit with you, Jim. Appreciate all of this. But let's get into the 21st century here. Let's get out of the 1900s wholesaling. One of the most important things that we're seeing, and even yourself, you're seeing it now, I'm watching you, is the impact of social media. So how does your social media presence play into your success now and going forward? It used to be the day where, I'm not on LinkedIn. I don't do that social media stuff. What are your feelings about its relevance today?
So I want everybody to grab a piece of paper and a pen and write down one of these nuggets here, which I think is really important. This is one of the principles I work on with everybody that I consult on an individual basis. And that is this: people listen with their eyes first. People listen with their eyes first. And so when someone's kicking the tire on you, what do they do? What did you do to do research for this podcast, right? You do research on me. You look up, you look for the present, and you look at what's going on there, and then you can form an opinion. Here's the point. Before you ever have a conversation with me, you can form a very strong opinion about me based on what's put out there. Now, you can put on, I could set up a Facebook page. I don't have a Facebook page, but I could set up a Facebook page, for example, and put out a completely different persona than what I actually am. And people would probably buy it, right? That's the bad side about social media. The worst side in the financial services industry is there are people that do amazing things, financial advisors and wholesalers, distribution companies, but they're the best kept secret, right? What you have to do, or there are kind of 4 tenets of personal branding, which is what social media and internet presence do. And those 4 tenets are this: everything that we put out there, when people are measuring us, listening with their eyes, we have to be able to answer 4 questions in terms of our branding. And that is, who are we? Number 1. Number 2, what do we do? Is number 2. Number 3 is, how do we do this differently than the competition? What's the distinction? And then number 4 is, why should someone consider working with us as a result of 1, 2, and 3? Who we are, what we do, how we do it differently, and why someone should consider working there. Is there a more efficient way to establish those things and enhance our brand than social media? Because last I checked, the cost is free, right? It just requires some effort. So I think we got to take advantage of this. It's 2019. By the way, I got to tell you, this blows me away. It's 2019, and we have entire broker-dealers and distribution companies that don't allow text messaging. Text messaging. Are you kidding me? My grandmother, God bless her, she just went to be in heaven here a couple of months ago. She was 86, 87 years old. Her preferred method of communication with me, guess what it was, Austin Mike? She wanted to text message me. How was your day? Happy birthday. Miss you. Love you. All of those things. We need to take advantage and embrace the technology that we have and be able to do that. There are amazing, ways to do this via social media, but also that kind of comes into using things as a communication platform. For a quick example, there's a company called My Rep Chat that you can sign up for, pay a few bucks a month, and you can text back and forth. By the way, as a broker-dealer president and CEO, I was always concerned, because if you ask the question to distribution companies, wholesalers, or financial advisors, are they text messaging? The answer is yes, right? The answer is they shouldn't be, but they are. I don't want to get in trouble. The firm shouldn't get in trouble. Let's just give them a way to do that. So I think social media is really important. And then we have to gravitate that towards, the industry is behind the social media curve and then the communication curve. So we have to look at the social media stuff, and then the ability to communicate, because communication often is going to come through some of these social media endeavors that we ought to be doing.
Let's go a little deeper on that one, since you brought it up. That was part of my my notes here to bring that up, texting between advisors and reps and wholesalers and advisors and just people in general. Do you think that the limitations are just technology based, meaning that you can't record the text, therefore there's not a record of it, therefore you can't do it? That's the whole premise behind it. Or do you think there's something else? And that's the first question, Jim, but I have a deeper question, I believe. The texts were invented, I believe, for one thing. So I could tell you something, but I don't want to have to talk to you right now. I want to be able to tell you something without talking to you. That, to me, is a shallow relationship. It takes more skill. It takes more attention for me to sit down with you face to face, for me to have a phone call with you, than an email, or the emails, call it love child text messaging. So 2 points. Is it technology? And then when technology catches up, are we going to use it more often? And then do you recommend it? Because it does kind of lead to a little more of a shallower, I'm telling you something and you're telling me back, as opposed to a conversation.
Two great questions. So I'm going to speak in terms of one organization as far as an example, because I'm actually familiar with them after having done some research. And then again, that's My Rep Chat. So I'm going to put my BD president CEO hat on for just a minute. I wanted to be able to provide a text messaging solution because I saw where we needed to get there. And the second point is great. I'll address that in just a second. But as far as the first point goes, the companies like my RepChat have removed the need for me to spend a few $1 million in 18 months on product development, and beta testing and alpha testing and then launching. I didn't have the time. I didn't have the budget. But I can go out there and for a few bucks a month, I can have this company that the advisors can subscribe to. I can pay for the cost, still cheaper than me building out a several $1 million platform. Or I can pass along the fee. I was the president and CEO of an independent broker dealer. We most likely would have passed along the fee, maybe subsidized it a little bit as a value add. But we can't say that the technology isn't there anymore because it is, and it's available and it's super cost efficient. And the onus is on them. They've got to keep it up and running, right? If somebody hacks into the system or whatever, they're very safe, they're very secure. And what they've done is they've made this more than a texting tool. And so now going into the second point, it's a communication platform. So here, I had a couple of doctor's appointments, just kind of the time of the year, the annual stuff. And what a wonderful thing. I get text message reminders. Hey, your doctor's appointment is in 3 days at this time. If this time still works, click yes or send 1 back or 2 no, and we'll call to reschedule. Those are wonderful things to do. But it's to your point about, I call it caveman communication. The thing that bugs me about texting is, people talk like cavemen, like when you're meeting someone for lunch, they'll text you and go, you there? Like, can you speak? I'm here. Are you there yet? Where are you sitting? Like, no, you there? We speak caveman. But here's the thing. There are a lot of client types that we want to attract, promotion by attraction. The text messaging is the desired communication form. Professional athletes, right? Especially a hockey player that's, on the road, 9 or 10 months out of the year, and they don't have time to get on the phone, but, they might have a question or whatever. They need to be able to access you, a doctor, a medical doctor, a surgeon. There are certain professions where it just works a little bit better. Would I rather have more meaningful, substantial, deeper communications with them? Yes. But the choice, we don't want the choice to be between, am I going to have to see them once a year only? Right? And have them not read an email or wait till their annual review that they might cancel at the last second? Or do I want to fill the communication gap? Because here, again, it boils down to, I need to communicate, especially with top clients. This is another principle, another tenet of mine. We need to communicate with our clients in a way that's meaningful to them, not just convenient for us. I don't like text messaging. I'm actually a pretty personable guy. I would rather a phone call. I would rather a cup of coffee face to face. But if my choice is, this person, that's what they want is text messaging, I want to give them that outlet, especially if they're one of my top clients. And I think we have to go there. So this, again, it's not my personal preference as an individual, but I see a huge business need in being there. And then I put my practice management hat on and I say, what a wonderful, efficient way to start to do things. Reminders for annual reviews. Don't forget to bring your packet in. People sometimes, come in, they're like, oh, I forgot my packet. I filled it out 6 weeks ago because you sent it to me so long ago. We can do things like that. Happy anniversary wishes, happy birthday wishes, happy 4th of July. You can push out important notifications. Our website's going to be down from this time to that time. They're not as deep and meaningful, but I think they're equally as important. Last thing is this. You and I both know this. The number one reason why clients fire financial advisors in every down market, every up market, it's a lack of, I'm going to say, perceived communication. Quick example on this, Officer Mike. I was visiting with somebody, said, I just lost one of my top clients. The relationship was $5.8 million. I said, what happened? He goes, he told me that I wasn't communicating. And I go, well, tell me about your communications. He goes, it's BS, Como. I'm telling you. Well, why? Explain. I meet with them twice a year, face-to-face. We do an annual review and then a mid-year review. I send them a quarterly newsletter. I send them a birthday card. I send them a Thanksgiving card. I do this, and I go, okay, so there's 2 face-to-face meetings, and everything else is general you do for the rest of the public. The same thing you do for a $100,000 client, right? Yeah, probably. I go, here's the deal. You were communicating in a way that was convenient for you and your office and easy and simple and doesn't cost much, but you were missing the mark because you didn't communicate in a way that was meaningful for them, is convenient for you. We got to get out of that mindset. And so I think that text messaging I really believe strongly that this is not just the future of our industry. It needs to start now. It needs to start today as just one of the tools, right, in the tool belt.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely one of the tools in the tool belt that you can either use, or you may even, pick a fight with it, say that you don't do that. It's kind of interesting. You don't have a Facebook page. Some people would say, oh, you're crazy. Some people would say, yeah, I believe in that. So I like it. One of the things you mentioned a couple of times is promotion through attraction. So now that we're talking about all of these social media presences, it's apparent to a guy like me that some people have an unfair advantage. And in fact, if you meet me face to face, you might be scared because I look much better online than I do in person, if you know what I mean. How do you feel about the phoniness, the filters that people are putting onto their social media presence? And then I'm going to go ahead and go for it and go one layer deeper. What about these hot gals? I mean, let's just call it what it is. They are playing the sexuality card in a business environment. Their LinkedIn photo is stunning. It should be on Instagram or a different platform. Guess what? There's something about our human brain that is making the male, and sometimes females, be attracted to that. They're using that for an unfair advantage. So how do you address that?
Yeah, so a couple things. They kind of tie together, right? The first and second part of that. But it boils down to, I believe that one of the principles that we need to have in our pursuit is we just need to be genuine. We just need to be transparent. I think that attracts more people than not. Now, there is a subset of our society that's very superficial that will say, listen, I'm only going to come to your office if you have chandeliers, granite countertops, a latte machine, and I sit in a $1,700 reflexology leather chair from whatever custom boutique shop. Whatever, that's fine. There's going to be that subset. But in terms of, we want people to work with us more on the personalized scale, because that's where the deeper relationships are. That's where referrals come from. That's where more business comes from. And that's where a sense of fulfillment working with a smaller book of clients can come from, is through that. I think that we're breaking rules if we are putting ourselves out there in a way that's not genuine and true and revealing. Listen, what if I put a picture of me without gray, right? I didn't have a gray hair in my head until I was president and CEO, or my beard either. But let's just say that I put a picture from 10 years ago where I was probably 30 pounds lighter, in better shape, had a little color on the skin, and I didn't have any gray. Well, you know what? Is there a dilemma with that? I think there is, in that I'm trying to portray something that I am currently not. But the second thing is I'm just misrepresenting, and people can feel that, right? They understand that. They don't even have to know what it is. They can go, this lacks genuineness. This lacks authenticity. And I think we have to get back to being a little bit more genuine and a little bit more authentic in this. And, on the second thing, I guess the only thing that I'll say about that is, duly noted, I see that, the types of approach that we take to try to gain a competitive professional advantage. I would say this: let's make sure that we're putting our trust and our confidence in what we can do for our clients. And let's focus a little bit more on serving and a little less on shining.
Well said. Well said. Unfortunately, some people would say, I want to do what works. And I am beautiful, and I am going to put it out there. And guess what? You better be really smart, because you're not beautiful. To compete with me, you're going to have to be smart. But a couple of things that we had for home, and I could talk to you forever. A couple of wholesalers. Only thing we could do worse would be to have a glass of red wine and a filet on the grill somewhere. But maybe we'll reserve that for another show. But let's talk about really just three things. Maybe we won't get to all of them. But let me just pick the first one. How do you see the impact of robo-advisors, robo-wholesalers now, and technology changing our business?
Yeah, so I just wrote down a quick note. In terms of robo, I think that, there are kids, my children's age, my children, and a little bit older. I didn't shop for insurance quotes on my iPhone. Right. I didn't do a lot of those things. I didn't grow up doing them, but people are. So the need for a relationship is being diminished, right? Because we have so much at our fingertips electronically. But there's a danger in that. If you had 3 symptoms today, and I don't know what they are, but if you plug them into WebMD, you plug in 3 symptoms and they're going to say you're going to be dead within 6 weeks. Like, just stay off of it. But what is the disconnect there? You don't have a person there giving you information. They're not putting things into context. There's not a full, accurate understanding of the current circumstances. And the same is true with a robo-advisor. The same is true with, listen, if someone can tell you, my risk tolerance is this, I want to go for the, shoot for the moon, I'll do international, I'll just do anything. But then you start asking them, secondary questions about, okay, let's just say we put this in whatever fund. I was going to name one. I shouldn't do that to you. But whatever fund, and it goes down 80% in the first year. You see those colors start to leave their face, their mouth gets dry, and they start swigging Maalox, right? Robo-advisor is not going to be able to see that. So sometimes clients, sometimes advisors are telling us one thing, they think they want something. But if I go in, for example, to a medical doctor and say, I think these things are important, he should be at least internally saying, shut up, dude, I'm the doctor. I'm the one that worked on a cadaver. You went on WebMD. Trust me, it's a cold. It's not whatever, fill in the blank. Robo will never be able to do that. And for a majority of the population, they're going to want the personal advice. They're going to want the relationship. They're going to want that trusted advisor. Sometimes they even want to be talked into something that they already know is right. So I think that Robo has some serious limitations. I think that it's going to continue to grow. I think it's going to continue to develop. And I kind of hope it does to a certain extent, but it is not, in my opinion, it is not going to take over the industry.
With that, it kind of remind me of this designation addiction that I believe our industry has. I was just impressed. I went to a guy's office and his card folded out into a scroll just to accommodate all of the initials that he had achieved over his illustrious education career. Those mean zero for a relationship. In fact, if it can sometimes be off-putting, and I would argue that they can also gain confidence too. You figure somebody has all those designations, maybe they know what they're talking about. Do you feel that there's a tremendous value in having a designation or 10? And should wholesalers or financial advisors aggressively pursue them as they currently are?
I think there's professional development that always, at hand. Full transparency, I will tell you this. I actually, before I was president and CEO, I had a president CEO that was thinking about making it a requirement for the senior executive team to get their CFP. And I just went, I might resign, right? It's not that important to me. My role doesn't need a CFP. I've got a calculator. But listen, the CFP is the gold standard. So I'm not taking away from the accomplishments of others. I'm just saying, well, let's look at me for an example. I've done okay with my life with a Bachelor of Science degree in social science from a really small private college in St. Paul, Minnesota. So is it going to get us a tremendous amount, of progress? Probably not. As long as the focus is primarily on the nobility of taking care of your client, that's the emphasis, that's fine. But all of a sudden, if I'm taking a test, some people do it habitually. They've made a career out of, okay, I've got my CFP, and now I'm going to do my SEMA, and now I'm going to do this, and now I'm going to do my CRC, and then my AIF. You just go, you got to be kidding me. Like, what if you took a fraction of that time and energy and put it back into some key relationships, right? Instead of mailing that check to that client that you've had for 18 years and her husband just died, maybe you should get in your car. Maybe you should drive over there, give her a hug and hand it to her and just listen to her for 30 minutes. Maybe that's the best thing to do. I'm not saying designations are bad, but if it becomes the priority over what you're actually in the business of doing, which is providing for clients, I think it's a backwards approach. I think they just have to come in balance.
Yeah, it was well said. Well said, Jim. Hey, we're going to have you back on the show again. You're just a fountain of knowledge and information. Let's wrap up. Let me ask you my signature questions. No right answer, no wrong answer. A lot of fun. Maybe you're prepared for these, maybe you're not. But let's say that you pick up your phone, your BlackBerry, whatever it might be, and on the other end of the line is 25-year-old Jim Komoszewski. You got a couple minutes with him. What advice would you give to your 25-year-old younger self?
I would say make sure you're always working hard, but you're having some fun along the way. I'm not going to sit in my rocking chair on my front porch in my Montana home that my wife and I want to build in the Montana, in the mountains in 20 years and say, man, I should have worked harder. Right? I'm not. I would tell my 25-year-old self, be driven, be successful, always do the right thing, but make sure to have some balance and fun along the way.
Sound like you might have been prepared for that one. No problem. Question number 2. Jim, if I could give you any superpower, which one would you choose, and what in the heck would you do with it?
I would want to be able to see into the future, but only like 3 days, right? Because I'd want to be able to go into the future and kind of, I think we look too far into the future sometimes, we freak ourselves out. But if I knew what was going to happen in 2 or 3 days from now, I could probably make a lot better decisions on the fly.
That's interesting. I actually carry my own crystal ball with me, but kind of funny or fuzzy at times. I can't really see what it says. Hey, I wanted to just basically thank you very much, sir, for being on the show today. Appreciate you. And thanks for your many years of hard work and helping people, and wish you many, many more. I'm sure that I can speak on behalf of everyone that's come in your presence, whether it was from wholesaling or being a senior executive, and say thank you on their behalf too. I'm sure that they would join me in wishing you much success both now and in the future. And as we say on the Awesome Wholesaler Experience podcast, Jim, it's about the journey. And I do wish you well on yours. Look forward to seeing you again soon. And a huge thank you to everyone that's tuning in today. And if you haven't already done so, hit that subscribe button. And if you want to, you can join the notification squad by clicking on that little bell, and you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. Now, this summer, we're on a mission to get 1,000 new subscribers. So we're going to need your help to make that happen. So definitely please subscribe. And if you're so inclined, go ahead and share the show with your colleagues and friends so they might enjoy wisdom like Jim provided today. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in and for supporting the show. And, of course, as always, thanks for being awesome. Bye, everybody.